Welcome to a world where love turns into deception, silence hides revenge, and every truth hits harder than betrayal itself. Here, you'll step inside powerful stories of family, loyalty, and heartbreak, where every twist of fate uncovers raw emotions, hidden lies, and shocking secrets buried deep behind perfect smiles. From a father's cruel words to a husband's quiet manipulation, from the aunt's so-called betrayal to the weight of walking away, every story here is a journey through pain, power, and poetic justice. If you've ever loved too deeply, trusted too easily, or walked away too late, these stories will feel hauntingly familiar. This isn't just storytelling, it's truth, wrapped in emotion, and told in a voice that feels real, human, and unforgettable. Welcome to Revenge in Silence, where every secret eventually speaks. Love was never meant to feel like a transaction, yet every act of care turned into another silent payment on someone else's debt. There was no celebration for the sacrifices made, only the sound of bills clearing, accounts balancing, and pride being swallowed to keep peace in a house built on fragile egos. The man who was supposed to protect and cherish had long stopped seeing effort as love. Instead, he measured worth in control of emotions, of freedom, of silence. Each payment made on his loans carried more than money. It carried pieces of trust. There was a quiet hope that someday, acknowledgement might replace criticism. But that day never came. He walked through life as if everything owed to him, not just financially, but emotionally too. The smallest gestures of kindness were treated like obligations, while his mistakes were wrapped in excuses that demanded forgiveness before the pain could even breathe. Behind every act of giving was a storm of unseen exhaustion. Nights spent calculating, hiding receipts, and pretending that balance existed when everything was breaking inside. He'd look at the cleared debts with that smug satisfaction, not of gratitude, but of entitlement. The words "thank you" were too heavy for him to say. Instead, he'd find ways to turn generosity into guilt, reminding that love should be unquestioning, that loyalty meant silence, and that a good wife never complains about what she carries. Then came the day when the truth leaked through the cracks. A voice note not meant to be heard, his voice, sharp and dismissive, calling the same person who had been paying his dues a failure and burden. The words cut deeper than any betrayal before. The irony was too cruel. The same man rescued from his own mess had been poisoning the air with contempt behind closed doors. That moment didn't ignite rage. It awakened clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when illusions crumble quietly. No shouting, no dramatic confrontations, just a calm, burning realization that love had been one-sided, and respect was never part of the equation. Every debt cleared for him became a chain lifted from the soul. Revenge didn't come in the form of destruction but detachment. The same money once used to pay off his failures now became the foundation of independence. Every payment that once erased his debt now began to erase his presence. The house that echoed with his pride slowly emptied of his power. Silence became the sweetest retribution, a silence he could no longer command or control. And in that silence, freedom was found not in taking something from him, but in giving nothing more. The message came late in the evening, unplanned and unexpected. The screen lit up, and for a moment it seemed harmless, just another video from someone in the family. But when the play button was pressed, everything that had been believed for years began to dissolve. The voice that followed was too familiar, too sharp, too cruel. A father's voice, cold, filled with disgust, speaking words that could never be unheard. He called his own child a failure, a burden, a disappointment. There was laughter in the background, as if the words were entertainment, not betrayal. That sound carried more weight than any argument ever could. It wasn't just the insult, it was the revelation of what had always been lurking beneath forced smiles and empty conversations. All those family dinners, those moments of pretending everything was fine, now seemed like rehearsed performances in a cruel play. Years of denial, of believing that loyalty could heal what was broken, shattered in a single clip. But what burned deeper was not the father's cruelty, it was the realization of who had sent the video. The aunt, always so careful with her words, always so observant. It wasn't done to comfort, It was done to expose. Whether from pity or power, she knew what she was doing. The truth was now out, raw and bleeding, and there was no going back. And standing beside that truth was a husband who watched silently, unmoved. His eyes didn't widen, his voice didn't waver. Instead, there was that same detached calm, the kind that hides judgment behind empathy. He'd always known how to turn pain into weakness, how to study it, how to use it later when control was slipping from his hands. He spoke softly, too softly, as if the betrayal was a test of strength, as if pain was something to be endured, not felt. That silence became louder than the father's voice. It revealed everything, the quiet satisfaction of a man who didn't defend, didn't comfort, but observed. The mask of support had slipped, and beneath it was a truth long ignored. His loyalty had never belonged to the person standing before him, but to the version of the story that kept him in power. He thrived in moments of emotional collapse, finding purpose in the wreckage of others' trust. The illusion didn't break just with the father's words. It shattered completely when the husband turned away, his indifference cutting sharper than any insult. In that moment, every shared memory lost its warmth. Every "I'm here for you" became a lie replayed in slow motion. The video wasn't just proof of a father's betrayal. It was the mirror reflecting a husband's hidden truth. A man who fed off control, who used empathy like a weapon and silence like a leash. The betrayal wasn't new. It had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And when it finally did, nothing remained but the sound of that voice and the quiet promise that it would never have power again. It started with a message from the aunt, simple, almost innocent. There was no warning, no reason to suspect the storm it carried. The video attached was short, only a few seconds long, yet it held enough venom to poison years of loyalty. It wasn't sent with kindness, it was sent with precision. The timing, the tone, the quiet satisfaction in her words afterward, all of it hinted at intent. Maybe she wanted chaos. Maybe she wanted to expose what everyone already whispered behind closed doors. Either way, that single act cracked open everything that had been carefully hidden beneath family politeness. The voice in the video wasn't new. It had always existed, just never caught. The father's contempt was cruel, but the aunt's role was something darker. She knew what her message would do. She knew it would break the illusion of unity, would tear open a wound that had been buried under guilt and expectation. But what she didn't know was that in trying to destroy peace, she accidentally set something free. In the hours after watching it, the house felt different, heavier, quieter, almost unreal. There was an ache that words couldn't carry, and beside it stood a man pretending to offer comfort. His voice was low, sympathetic, almost rehearsed. But the eyes told another story. They didn't reflect empathy. They reflected calculation. He watched pain like a spectator, measuring every breath, every tremor, as if learning how to use it later. He had always been skilled at disguising control as care. Now, stripped of all illusions, that disguise began to crack. The aunt's betrayal didn't just expose a father's cruelty. It exposed a husband's truth. The man who once claimed to protect was secretly fueled by dominance. He thrived on emotional imbalance, hers, her family's, anyone's, because it gave him power. And the video, the aunt's so-called weapon, became his opportunity. He tried to twist it, to make it about strength and weakness, about forgiveness and letting go. He wanted to rewrite the story, turn victim into fool, make pain seem like overreaction. But this time, the manipulation didn't work. The words hit differently now. The silence between them no longer carried fear. It carried clarity. It was then that the true meaning of the aunt's act came into focus. Maybe it wasn't malice after all. Maybe it was the universe's cruel way of granting liberation wrapped in betrayal, disguised as cruelty. That video didn't destroy peace. It ended submission. It pulled the final thread in a web of control that had gone unnoticed for too long. In the end, the aunt's message was both a wound and a gift, the pain that birthed awareness, the betrayal that sparked quiet revenge. And when the last illusion fell, so did the need for permission to walk away. The house always looked warm from the outside, laughter echoing in the halls, framed photos lining the walls, smiles frozen in time. But beneath the surface, everything was performance. Every "we're proud of you" carried a quiet bitterness, every compliment wrapped in comparison, every hug followed by a whisper meant to remind who truly held power. Love wasn't given, it was traded. Obedience for approval, silence for peace. The air inside that home was heavy with unspoken debts. It wasn't about money, though the balance sheets often came up during arguments. The real currency was guilt. It was used skillfully, a way to control, to remind that no matter how much was done, it would never be enough. The father played the role of a self-made man, always reminding everyone how much he had sacrificed. The mother perfected the art of emotional guilt, tears turning into tools of manipulation. And then there was the husband, polished, calm, admired by outsiders, but cold in moments that mattered most. He had a way of twisting every truth, turning every mistake into proof of weakness. Whenever tension filled the room, he'd speak softly, never raising his voice, because control didn't require volume. It required precision. He made people question themselves until right and wrong blurred. When lies came from him, they didn't sound like lies. They sounded like wisdom. And that's how the home stayed together, not by love, but by careful maintenance of illusion. Friends saw perfection. They saw the couple who had it all, who stood by each other through everything. No one saw the arguments that ended in silence, not because problems were solved, but because someone was too exhausted to fight. No one saw how affection became performance, a script rehearsed for guests and neighbors, while resentment festered like rot behind locked doors. There were moments of realization, brief flashes when the truth felt too loud to ignore. But every time those thoughts rose, they were smothered with guilt. He's done so much, families fight. It's just stress. Those excuses became survival mechanisms. The lies were easier to live with than the loneliness of truth. But when the mask finally slipped, it didn't happen in an explosion. It happened quietly through gestures too subtle to miss anymore. A smirk during pain, a glance that carried satisfaction instead of concern. That's when it became clear this wasn't a family built on love. It was a hierarchy disguised as harmony. The husband didn't want partnership. He wanted control disguised as care, loyalty packaged as gratitude. And once that was understood, everything changed. The house no longer looked beautiful, it looked staged. Every photo, every promise turned hollow. The perfection that once impressed the world now looked like evidence of something sinister, a family that thrived on lies, not love. And when truth finally settled in, silence became the only honest sound left in that home. There was no need to shout. The war had already been fought in silence, in the quiet moments between trust and betrayal. In the nights when the heart wanted to scream, but the lips refused to move. The man who once thrived on control never noticed that his power was slipping, piece by piece, replaced by the same calm he mistook for submission. He believed silence meant weakness. He never realized it was strategy. Every act of kindness that had once been used to protect him now became a plan to escape him. The same money that cleared his debts, erased his guilt, and restored his reputation was being saved differently now, quietly redirected, quietly built into something untouchable. He noticed nothing. He never paid attention to small details, only to moments where his voice could echo louder than hers, and that arrogance became his undoing. He still lectured about loyalty, about how families should stay together no matter what. He still carried that same smug pride when talking to others, the husband who stood by his wife, the man who handled everything. It was almost poetic how easily he believed his own story. While he bragged about his sacrifices, the foundation beneath him was already shifting. The woman he thought he controlled had stopped reacting. No more explanations, no more pleading, just stillness. That stillness unnerved him, the absence of emotion. The quiet acceptance it was something he couldn't manipulate. He began to test it, picking fights over nothing, trying to provoke tears that no longer came. He didn't know that every insult, every cold look, was now a reminder of his fading power. What once fueled his pride now fed her resolve. The day he realized he'd lost control didn't come with a fight. It came with a simple moment, an empty bank account that used to overflow with her earnings. No confrontation, no accusations. Just numbers gone. The money he once used to sustain his ego had turned into something else entirely: independence, freedom, and he never saw it coming. Friends asked why the sudden distance, why the house felt colder. He told them it was stress, that she had changed. He never admitted that he had broken something too many times for it to heal. The truth was, silence had become her revenge, not through destruction, but through detachment. Every word unspoken, every tear withheld, was a quiet declaration: the debt is paid, and so is the love. He still calls sometimes, still tries to sound calm, still believes he can fix what he never understood. But there's nothing left to fix. The same silence he once demanded now answers him back. And that silence, steady, cold, and final, is the sound of his defeat. Freedom didn't come with joy. It came with silence, a silence that was heavier than years of pain. It didn't look like victory either. It looked like empty rooms, untouched coffee cups, and messages left unread. For so long, the mind had been wired to believe that love meant endurance, that holding on through the storm was strength. But when truth finally replaced love, it didn't ask for revenge. It asked for release. He never noticed the moment when love turned into obligation. The husband who once demanded devotion still walked through the house as though everything belonged to him: the words, the air, even the silence. He believed he had won because there were no arguments, no tears, no defiance. What he couldn't see was that quiet had become freedom, and distance had become power. There was a strange peace in no longer needing his approval. For years he thrived on control, small, calculated acts that made her question herself, that turned affection into confusion. He could twist truth until guilt sounded like gratitude. But the day came when the lies no longer worked, when his voice no longer carried authority, when the heart, once terrified of losing him, finally realized he was already gone long before the body followed. Freedom, in that sense, wasn't escape. It was understanding. Understanding that staying had been a form of slow death, and leaving was the first breath after years of suffocation. He called it betrayal. He called it ungratefulness. He called it everything except what it truly was: survival. He kept waiting for the breakdown, the apology, the return, but none came. He didn't know that the absence of response was the real revenge, the kind that doesn't destroy but transforms. The kind that leaves the other person trapped in their own echo, wondering why their power no longer works. The memories lingered of coarse moments that once felt safe, words that once felt genuine, but they no longer hurt. They became like distant echoes, faint reminders of a time when illusion felt like love. And as they faded, so did the weight of needing to be understood. There was no more explaining, no more defending. The silence he once demanded now lived inside him, and for the first time it was peaceful. He'll never understand how freedom feels, not because it's hidden, but because it doesn't look like victory. It looks like indifference. It sounds like calm. It feels like finally not needing to prove anything to anyone. And when the final door closed behind, the air didn't taste like loss. It tasted like truth, heavy, real, and beautifully free. If this story struck your heart, hit like, and if it made you think twice about love, betrayal, or silence, then subscribe for more. Every week, we uncover another hidden truth, stories that cut deep, heal slowly, and remind us that even silence has a voice. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next twist in our world of family secrets and emotional revenge. Your support helps these stories reach others who need to hear them. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the quietest endings speak the loudest.